hello viewer, this is your first agricultural TV station in the country. Of course, you know the program is Aqua Farming. For those of you who are tuning in for the very first time, Aqua Farming is a program that tells you all you need to know that is in the water, be it fish, shrimps, crab, whatever that exists in the water is what we discuss in a commercial aspect of it, and better still, how they have been brewed so we all can know what you consume, how they have been reared. Of course, for some time now, I've been discussing fish holistically, and today happens to be yet another day where we're discussing fish breeding. Fish breeding talks about all you need to know when it comes to you breeding your fish, that is, raising your fish to the point where you sell, or better say, where you consume them as an individual. And also on that note, that we have to go as far as we can to make sure we bring to you some of the best brains in this very field of fish farming, so they can be able to share their wealth of experience thereby making a lot of people who have been losing when it comes to fish farming to be able to know what to do at every given point when raising or breeding their fish. And it's on that note where we have Mr. Gabriel Wase, who happens to be a fishery scientist and also a consultant in the world of aqua farming. Mr. Gabriel, it's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me, sir.
All right. From my introduction, we talk about fish breeding, basically, and a layman, basically, we hear fish breeding. You want to know, basically, what is this person saying? Because I believe fish breeding is not just an aspect; it's like a chain, basically. Can you just take us around your understanding as to what fish breeding is all about?
Yes. In the business of fish farming, when you talk about fish breeding, essentially you're referring to all aspects that results to production of fish seeds, which are made available for farmers to rear to table size. So all the activities that take place in the hatchery, from collection of broodstocks to injection, then stripping, and then the fertilization and the rest of it. What comes out at first from the hatchery, you have the hatchlings, and then you nest them to fingerling stages, then to juvenile stages, and at that time they are ready to be stocked. And at this phase, it is not everyone who can handle it. That is why you can see that in the country today a lot of hatcheries are folding because of one challenge or the other. So it is quite technical and requires a lot of training and some bit of experience as well. So essentially, it has to do with everything that provides the seed for the farmer to stock, to be reared to table size.
Now, you talk about the seed. Now, what makes a seed a good seed? Is this the sperm, or the eggs, or the processes in which they are being?
Yes. Several factors are to be considered when it comes to the quality of fish seeds. It can begin as far back as the genetic makeup of the parent stock. So, and that is why selection of broodstock is essential. So when you go for selection of broodstock, there are certain characteristics that ought to be considered. Y size might not necessarily be the key among them. It is also important, because sometimes stunted growth can be as a result of genetic makeup of the parent stock, and so it's not advisable to go for a parent stock that are stunted. So when you have a parent stock that have good growth characteristics, which is expressed in their sizes and weight, as well as a level or how gravid they are, those are some of the qualities that will qualify parent stock to be used or to be considered good enough. And then when you make your selection of the broodstock, you also have a duty of carrying out the breeding exercise. And once the breeding exercise is completed, there is another essential factor, which is feeding. Because, of course, at that early stage, feeding is quite essential. Poor feeding can result to stunted growth, and stunted growth means that the seeds are not good enough, because when you sell them out to the farmers, they keep feeding and they complain they are not growing. Why? Because they have lost their growth potentials in the hatchery while they were under the care of the fish fish breeder. So apart from the selection of broodstocks, feeding is quite essential, and that is why I always advise farmers, for those who care, those that I consult for, you don't just go out and obtain fish seeds. You ought to obtain them from trusted sources. Today people are quite smart in the business of fish farming. A lot of persons will never tell you the truth, and therefore it boils back to you to make your own research and have trusted supplies so that you can be sure of what you are obtaining. So I'll give you an instance. In humans, for instance, rackets, which causes bow leg in children, is as a result of nutritional deficiency, which at the early stages can be controlled. But once this child grows to become an adult, there is nothing that can be done at that time. And the same thing applies to fish. So once the growth potential is lost during the early stages, whatever the farmer does, the growth, the weight gain will not be commensurate to the feed consumed. And that means putting in more and getting very little of the output. And in the end, it's a loss on the farmer, because the supposedly profit is being taken by the fish and the commensurate weight gain is not achieved. So this is why quality fish seeds are so much of importance when it comes to fish farming.
Wow, interesting. You talked about stunted growth when it comes to growing fish and all that. Can you maybe give us some of the few factors apart from the parenting and the rest that causes stunted growth? Because there are some fish, even as much as you spend a lot on them and all that, they still are probably just maybe gaining some few weights.
Yes, when we talk of stunted growth, several factors can be responsible.
Okay.
Environmental factors is one. When, of course, fish is reared in water. So water is a medium through which fish is reared. So without good water, fish cannot do well. So it could be that your fishes are of good quality, and maybe you also have good quality feed as well. But if the water condition is not optimal, it's not good enough, it's not at the best practice, your fish cannot grow well. So this is one condition. Another condition can as well be the feed, because sometimes, because of course a lot of persons are opting for local feed manufacturers, whereas those feed manufacturers, most of them are not being taken to the lab to carry out the analysis to understand the nutritional composition, if it actually complies with what is being declared on the labels. So poor feeding, this talks about the quality and quantity, the frequency or time of feeding, because you can have good feed, good quality feed, but if you are not being, the frequency of feeding is not okay, you may still have stunted growth, because you don't have the best out of it. And if you have as much quantity but the quality is not good, you will still not have the best out of it. Remember, we usually say that for a good feed, it is expected that a fish consumes 1 kg of feed, it should also have 1 kg of flesh weight gain. But in instances where you have feed that does not meet the nutritional requirement or needs of your fish, that cannot be possible. So sometimes you end up spending up to like 3 kg before you are able to gain 1 kg weight gain. So feeding is another factor. Thirdly, we also consider the parental history of the fish seeds. So if the parental history, if the parents of those offsprings experience stunted growth, or genetically they have been stunts, then their offsprings cannot do better. So these are factors that are responsible for stunted growth when it comes to fish.
Wow, interesting. Now I want to ask, there are people who believe that feeding their fish is once in a day. Some does twice. What is the best way? How many times are you supposed to feed? Is it that when they are satisfied you're fine, or you can go like 3 times in a day? Or how is it supposed to be split?
Well, the ideal feeding formula for fish, number one, should be based on the weather condition, the temperature to be specific. Of course, you understand that for every 1 degree rise in temperature, there is a 10% increase in metabolic activities. This is basic science. So if the weather is okay during good weather conditions, you can afford to feed your fish up to 3 times a day, especially at the early stages, at fingerlings and juvenile stages. But once they go to grow out, feeding them twice a day is enough. Because you feed them in the morning, you feed them in the evening. Of course, you understand that digestion, you consider the period of digestion. Because if the weather is okay, for instance, maybe the temperature is not below 25 degrees Celsius, you understand that between 4 to 5 hours digestion is complete. So if you fed your fish around 9 in the morning, of course you know that before 5 p.m. digestion is already completed. And that means they will be hungry at that time. So if you feed them in the hours of morning, 9 in the morning and then 5 in the evening, then till the following day. But if you are a farmer who resides on the farm or have your staff that resides on the farm, it's also advisable that for catfish in particular, you can also feed at night, making it 3 times within 24 hours. So basically, feeding your fish twice a day is ideal. But the quantity again, you should consider, because ideally we expect, or we say that feeding of fish should be at 5% of body weight for grow out. 3% weight, body weight, while for fingerlings and juveniles we recommend 5%. So that means that if you calculate the quantity of feed to be consumed within 24 hours, you ration it within the number of times you want to give to your fish. And among all this, you ensure that you have good and optimal water quality, because that is what determines the ease of conversion by the fish. If the water quality is bad, they will end up picking less of your feed and the rest becomes weight, especially when you are using sinking pellets. So that is what it has to do when it comes to feeding. If you feed your fish twice a day, it's fine. You can make it 3 times a day, especially during heat periods like now, because the higher the temperature, the ease the rate of metabolic activities, which it talks about the digestion. So once you see that digestion is complete, you can feed again. If it is catfish, I recommend, if possible, feed at night, because they are nocturnal. They are most active at night. Yes, so feeding at night also could help to improve performance or growth and weight gain.
All right. Now, please, when it comes to fish breeding generally in Nigeria, to say, a lot of people are more into catfish, and then we have others like tilapia. Why is everyone running to? Is it because of its market viability, or better still, it's easier, or because I feel maybe there should be more people doing it? What is the difference between the two when it comes to fish breeding?
Yes, the difference is clear. Fish farming is not just a farming, but it's a business. And when you talk about a business, you try to venture into something that is profitable, something that has lesser risk, something that has a risk that is worth taking. So a lot of persons are into catfish in Nigeria because, one, catfish has that general acceptability. It is mostly consumed by the locals. It is quite hardy and easy to rear, and there is high rate of success when it comes to the farming operations, while the other species are also of value. For instance, as a person, I don't have interest in tilapia because of the bony nature, and there are several other persons like myself. And so sometimes when you produce some of these species, basically they become valuable only in terms of research, because when you talk of species like carp, species like tilapia, which are culturable in Nigeria, there are still some others where the weather condition might not permit us to culture. But for those that we are able to culture here in the country, because of the demand, it's not as high as the one for catfish. And because all of us are going to business to make profit, we begin to go where there is quick turnover. And that is why you can see that culture of catfish is more prevalent compared to other species in Nigeria. And if you go to other countries like Ghana, they have more of tilapia, because that is what is more marketable in their own terrain. But for us here, we culture what we can easily sell. So that informed the decision. And additionally, like I've said, catfish possesses a lot of qualities and characteristics that makes it outstanding, because it is quite hardy, it can tolerate adverse environmental conditions, it can withstand some certain disease conditions, which tilapia cannot. So as a farmer, you stock your catfish, you stock your tilapia, and at the end of the day you discover that your harvest from one side is not enough compared to what you have put in. So it does not encourage you to continue. So these are some of the reasons why the culture of catfish in Nigeria is more common compared to the other species.
Many thanks for staying with us here on your darling station, the Agriculture Research Council of Nigerian Television. Of course, we've been talking to Gabriel Wase, a fishery scientist rather, and also a consultant where he's been talking about fish breeding. Let's go on this quick break. When we return, of course, we're going to be talking more. Don't go away, stay with us. Welcome back. It's good to have you back on your first agricultural TV station. Of course, we've been talking to a fishery scientist and a consultant, Gabriel Wase, who has been telling us all about fish breeding. Gabriel, welcome back.
Thank you.
Well, before we went on that break, we actually put these two different fishes side by side, talking about tilapia and then the catfish, which is the most popular in Nigeria. Now, what do you think is the most important thing a beginner needs to know before he goes into fish farming? Is it that he needs to explore the market of the terrain he is? Is it that he needs to know where he is, the water is sitting on? Is it that he needs to know the best broodstock to get? What is the basic thing that if you got it right in fish farming, you've gotten it for life? And if when you get that very aspect wrong, you know there are some aspects of everything that you can compromise and still end up getting a good yield. You know? So what is that very aspect that is so vital? Is it the capital itself? Is it the water itself? What is it?
Yes, when it comes to fish farming, the first thing that should be considered is preparedness.
Okay.
How prepared are you? And when we talk of this preparation, it encompasses a whole lot. Number one, you don't just put your money into a business you don't understand. So you need to have an understanding of the business, the nature of the business. You need to survey the market, who is ready to get or buy your product, and what do you intend to sell at the end of the day. Because why I would not advise beginners to go into hatchery operations, you can go into grow out because it's less technical. So that as a beginner you can be able to handle. But before you go into grow out, how much preparation have you made in terms of carrying out a survey that you're able to know what are you going to produce at the end of the day and what quantity are you aiming at delivering within a particular period of time, say 5 months, 6 months or thereabout. And when you make preparations of the financial implication of achieving that, what or who is going to be your end user? Who are your customers? Where is your market? Because it is not after you have made your production that you start running here and there to get a market for your product. So preparation is key in arriving at success. And when you prepare yourself, you prepare your capital, you survey the markets, and then it comes to the real operation. As for the operation, I always advise beginners, don't just go into it because you want to commit capital. And when you commit capital, it means involving experts who will guide you. They are not going to be with you constantly on the farm, but that is what we do. So you go, you offer professional advice. If there is anything wrong, you correct, and it is implemented. And once implemented, at the end of the day, you are able to get what you want. But if you go into the business just because people are going, and then you have no prior preparation, you will not be able to land well, because sometimes you see people go in and they are just looking for who to buy. But if you already make your contact on who is your prospective buyer, once your product is getting close to being ready, you invite them to prepare that at so time you'll be harvesting, so you don't have to go beyond your own timeline. So these are some of the key things that the farmer must consider before going into farming, fish farming in particular.
Okay. Now, you are a fishery scientist and a consultant as well. What do you think is the major problem that affects your kind of business? And how can it be tackled? Is it that government have not come into it properly, or better still, the association is not thriving well? Because I believe you must have an association. The lack of CORAF and some other NGOs around the world have come to the aid of the fishery industry to see how they can revive it. Because I believe till date, almost 80% of the fish we consume in Nigeria are being imported. So what is the major problem that affects your...
Yes, just like every other business, fish farming is not an exception. There are several challenges here and there that we are facing, and one of which is ease of access to finance. Of course, you understand that fish farming is capital intensive, requires a lot of money. Presently now, you see a bag of 2 mm, for instance, a blue crown, is sold at about 25,000 and even more in some locations.
Sorry, please.
So like I was saying, essentially the difficulty of having access to finances is one major problem that is affecting fish farmers today. You try to go to Bank of Industry, Bank of Agriculture to access finances. It's not easy, because sometimes they expect you to sell the whole of your family members or bring them as collateral, maybe your lands and all, which in some cases you don't even have those things. So the requirements are quite stiff that farmers are unable to, even though the money is locked there in the banks meant for farmers, but farmers are unable to gain access to them. And so you see that the conditions are not favorable, and without capital we cannot thrive. And that is why I see a lot of farms are folding. Every business requires capital to grow. So if the government can make either soft loans or even give grants to farmers, I think it's going to go a long way to help us. Then another point where we can also gain assistance is maybe the government has to do more. The associations are not working. In the past, where they have things like commodity boards that monitor prices of items, today they are not. Even the cooperatives are not functional. They are just on paper. And so at the end of the day, there is no price control. You see, the middlemen, they have plenty of money. So at the end of the day, when you have your products, they bring plenty of money to your farm, and they make you see, this is what I have, and it's cash. And you know that the unit price is quite poor. But cumulative, it becomes an amount, and they're using it as a bargain, the power to bargain. So sometimes they end up taking the profit that's supposed to go to the farmer, and they take it. And this is what we have toiled for 6 months, 5 months, or sometimes even more. And you didn't make as much profit as a middleman that comes to buy within hours. But because he has the money, he tempts you and takes away your product. So if the government can have a body where there will be a price control and regulation, additionally, they can as well bring up what we call off-takers. Okay. So that when we come together as farmers and we harvest our produce, we can bring them together, the government can off-take, because most farmers do not have the resources to process. So after production, they sell fresh, and that is where the loss is coming. So that's why you see some farmers, after the first market sells, they run out of business because what they sold is not enough. And then of course you know how unstable the economy has been. The unit cost of what you bought and input you procured last month, today is different. So those are some of the challenges that we are facing that requires government intervention. Then for us as individuals too, there are some who refuse to employ the services of professionals and themselves are not experts, and sometimes it gets to fumble by themselves. So these are some of the challenges that are facing the industry, but the government has a larger role to play by ensuring that farmers have ease of accessing loans, or even give grants to farmers so that we can thrive. So these are some of the things that should be done to improve, because like you said, yes, the production within the country has not met the needed requirement, and fish is still coming from elsewhere. But we have the capacity, we have the land, we have the water, we have the expertise, that if we have the support from government, we'll be able to meet up with whatever fish production that is needed within the country and even export same.
Okay.
So all that is needed is support from the government, support from NGOs, support from well-meaning individuals. Like I've said, I've had interaction with so many farmers on the field, a lot of challenges here and there, but myself I cannot help because I need help myself.
Yeah.
So the government has to come in to improve the productivity in this sector.
All right. The government has to come out and of course improve the productivity in this sector. These are the same words of Mr. Gabriel Wase, a fishery scientist and also a consultant. Well, we've been talking about fish breeding right here on your program, Aqua Farming. On behalf of the crew who made it possible, Mr. Shane Wilson, of course, I'm Bala as well. My name is Joshua Shah. Thank you for being a part of the program. Bye for now.